Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the LinguaFolio webinar for middle of the year 2020-2021 session. This is our second webinar of this week. We had on Tuesday our session with our world languages educators, and today is specific to English as a second language. So here we have today few special panelists. They're going to share their expertise and how they have implemented LinguaFolio, and they're going to give us very specific resources and ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and move. You can see this is our agenda for today. We're going to have some logistics, talking about the different platforms we're using today. We have our guests, as I was mentioning. They're going to talk about how they have motivated their students to use LinguaFolio. And also we're going to use today two of the biography components. In the previous session at the beginning of the year, we talked about two of the components. There are 6. And today we're going to address intercultural experiences, summary, and the learning inventory. So we're going to see how these look and how you could use them in your classrooms, and if you have used them as well, if you can share that. And we have a third special guest today. She is going to talk about the connections between social emotional learning, the core competencies, with LinguaFolio, and what is the work that ESL is being doing in terms of social emotional learning and the different strategies that you also have available. And then we will continue with some information that you have on our Google site. We're going to show you how to access the LinguaFolio classroom materials and the PD that we have offered. And then we will finish and close our session today with questions, opportunities, and wrap-up. So thank you, everyone. See if you can hear me loud and clear. Please say yes or say hi in the chat, so I make sure that you can hear me. Before I continue, let's see if I see. Remember in the chat to use everyone or all attendees before you send your message, so I can see that you are sending a text. I'm going to send someone today right now. Welcome. Okay, thank you. I see there are some messages coming in, so thank you for being with us today. So we're going to continue. So this is the NCDPI LinguaFolio team. We have our former section chief, Dr. Christy Day. She has been promoted. She is now our assistant director in the K-12 standards, the curriculum and instruction division. And then you have Dr. Emery Gunter, world languages consultant, and Satli Stokes for ESL Title III team in the screen. So we're using two platforms today for communication, and we have, let me see. Thank you, Alan. Marie, if you can hear me, could you select the chat? Looks like it's only going to panelists, not to everyone or all attendees. So if we can change that, I would appreciate it, because we want our participants to be able to collaborate today. So thank you. Thank you for making that, making us aware of that. So we're using WebEx controls. We're going to use the chat panel today. We have a couple of activities, and we want you to contribute through the chat panel. So you should see it. It's under the participants panel. So just let us know, and thank you. That I think it's going to be solved in a minute. We're trying to help our other panelists, so you will see it in a minute. And then we also have menti.com. This is a free platform that we are using. You don't need to log in. You will only type menti.com on your device. If you're using your phone, this is easier. And then enter a code that we are going to provide so you can participate. And Menti is a free app that you can also use in your classroom, and you can collect some information, some data from your students without having to share any personal information or downloading or paying for any specific data in the application. So it's completely free. Now we're going to go to the first poll of the day. We want to know why you join us today. So we have this poll, the code. We're going to put it in. Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's in the chat. It's 878147. So you are going to click on your computer, open this new window. If you are looking at the chat, Anne-Marie has shared the link so you can access and enter the code. Or if you do it on your smartphone, you can just type menti.com and enter the code 878147. And let us know why you joined the broadcast today. You want to just access PD for language educators, ask a question about LinguaFolio, connect with other educators, earn 1 contact hour for license renewal, gather information to share with others, or learn about new resources. So I'm going to go to our poll and see if we have some answers. Okay. Remember, the code is in the chat, so if you didn't have time to look at the code, and it is also at the top on our screen, you should see it, so you can participate. Okay. We're going to refresh one more time, and we're going to allow a couple of seconds so you can share why you joined the broadcast today. So we have, okay, a few more entries. Thank you very much for participating. If for whatever reason it's not working on your computer, feel free to use the chat and let us know in the chat. Okay, so we have more participation. I think we can close this. We have a good idea of who has joined us today and why. You want to have access to PD for language educators and learn new resources. And this is great because we're going to have 2 educators sharing how to use LinguaFolio. So then you will be able to ask some questions and maybe share as well what you think you can do with LinguaFolio in your classroom. And we also have some other participants, 21%, gather information to share with others. So maybe you are not an educator in the classroom, but you are a school leader or a lead teacher, and you want to share this with your teams in your schools. So thank you very much. And then connections, that's really important. And earn 1 contact hour for license renewal. So now that we look at this, just a reminder, you will receive a certificate after this session. You will receive it via email. So you will have 0.1 contact hours, and you will be able to submit this to your districts, and they will certify that they will give you your CEUs. So we are really good at this. We have a great administrator assistant, and in the next couple of weeks, we always say that, but usually it's sooner, you will get that certificate. Okay, so we're going to go back to our presentation. Thank you for joining and sharing. And now the most important part today, and I'm really excited because we have 2 educators from the field who have used LinguaFolio in the past, and they're going to share how they're motivating their English learners to use LinguaFolio. What is LinguaFolio for them and how are they using it? And they might have only 5 minutes to share, but we have some links, and they're going to have their emails, so you can ask afterwards if you want to get more information or learn more about what they're doing. So let's see if we have our panelists. Do we have Betsy?
Yes, I'm unmuting her right now so she can speak.
Perfect. Welcome, Betsy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, I can't believe all this technology finally came together.
This is a challenge, but we appreciate that you're here today.
Yeah, I love it. I have used LinguaFolio with the middle school crowd, and I've also used it with elementary students. I've used it in different ways, so I won't go into a lot of detail right now, but basically I have found it to be very successful, and it has caused the students, I believe, to do a lot more reflection about their learning than they ever would otherwise. think I lost you. Can you hear me still?
Yes, Betsy, thank you. And if you have our participants, if you have any questions, Betsy, we have, and we are going to share in the chat, there is one of the teacher videos that we have on our Google site is highlighting, showcasing Betsy, and she is talking about her work using LinguaFolio in middle school. So if you want to share something else about it, how was that experience, Betsy, how you used to do it, while we get some questions in the chat.
All right. Well, when I started, we didn't even have the technological advances that we do now. We started out with just paper and pencil and a notebook, and I really wasn't sure how to go about it. But I did understand that the guiding principle was that the students were supposed to look over their work to select goals that they wanted to accomplish. And that involved, first of all, analyzing where they were and along the continuum of language learning in the 4 domains. So we had a lot of discussions about that. We had a lot of checklists that we went through. We went through the grid of language proficiencies and all the different things that are involved in having proficiency in each domain. So we all sort of, took a deep dive into that, the whole idea that language is a process, that you are constantly growing and learning. Language is not really, it doesn't really end, and that there are ways that you can measure what you know, and there are ways then that you can look forward and decide what your next steps would be. And that was just a huge learning leap for all of us, actually, at that time. I focused mostly on the writing because that was the easiest to get artifacts or evidence for. And it was the easiest for the students to reflect upon. We could use rubrics, and we had certain strategies that we could all apply to analyzing what kind of writing the students were doing, what level they thought they were. And that took us down a lot of avenues of learning that I hadn't really counted upon. And then the students began to sort of drive the whole thing, because once they got the idea that they really didn't know everything there was to know about English, and that there were ways that they could grow their learning and ways they could display their growth, they kind of got and just really excited about the portfolio idea. Most kids, well, these were young adults, but they all sort of have an innate desire to collect things. And I kind of try to play on the collection idea, that when you have a portfolio and you can show the things that you know how to do, you're really collecting a huge amount of data about yourself, and that you can prove to other people that many of the things that you have learned. And at that time, some of these students were getting ready to go to high school, and they were going to have to produce a senior project eventually. And even though they really hadn't started high school yet, they had brothers and sisters who were working on that. And I sort of explained to them that, yes, you could use your LinguaFolio if you continued it. You could use it as a senior project, and this would be pretty impressive. I only have one student that really went ahead and followed through with that I know about, and I communicated with him while he was in high school. But for the younger kids, I have not had that sort of approach. But what I try to do with them to get them excited about it is to relate it to their desire to collect things, whether they're playing Fortnite and collecting skins, or whether they are collecting Beyblades in the 3rd grade, that this is a way to show a collection. And although many of them had a lot of work that they had done for other teachers, and of course it's all on Google Drive, they had stuff from 2 or 3 years back, even the 5th graders, they didn't realize that they could actually select from work that they had done and put that into an organized platform to show what they could do. And they liked doing that. They liked the idea of, oh, I've really done all this work. So they started from that angle, and then they began to think of other things they could do. And while I had originally decided that for these younger kids, I would select what they should do next, they kind of took over that and decided that I was really not going to select what they were going to do next. And they got together with their friends in the class, and they kind of selected things on their own. And well, it just sort of went from there, and I kind of stepped back. So I can't really say that I motivated them so much as the approach of the platform itself motivated them. They liked talking directly into the platform and recording things and listening to each other. And sometimes they would feel embarrassed about talking, so they would go to parts of the room that I had closed off, and they would do it alone or with a friend, and then do it over and over until they had a recording they liked. I think they learned more about speaking doing that than in any of the more formal speaking arrangements that I had put into my lesson plans, any of the more formal speaking practices that I had decided upon. So I think the real motivation is just the motivation that kids have to really take charge of their learning and, sort of be in charge. And we don't give them a lot of opportunities to do that for many very good reasons. But I think I probably said enough to give you an idea about where it all went for me and for my kids. So I felt very, very good about how it added to my practice and how it helped the kids, the students, to become more proficient. But the one thing I would like to say is I think the biggest plus is that once a student starts to think about what they have done and what does it mean and what does that mean they can do, and then they start to select what they want to do, I think you've sort of begun the process of becoming a very accomplished learner. And I believe that's probably the most important thing that could happen for a student.
That's right, Betsy. And I love what you said. By implementing LinguaFolio, you gave your students the opportunity to reflect on their language learning and practice. And I love that, yes, making those connections with things that they love doing. Yes, you like playing this and collecting things, and this is sort of like what you have to do with LinguaFolio, and it's something you're doing so you feel accomplished. Like, oh, I want to do this, and now I know that I was able to do it. I have the evidence, I recorded this, and that practice, that additional practice they get because they know they want to do it better and better. So that's great. Let's see if we have some questions in the chat. I really appreciate that, Betsy. And if you, all attendees, you saw Anne-Marie share in the chat the link to a video, I would recommend that you save that link. We're going to share it as well, and we have it on our Google site. But it's Betsy talking a little more and showing some of the samples of the activities that she had when she was implementing LinguaFolio her students. So it's really good. And thank you for that, Betsy. I don't see any questions in the main chat. I don't know, Anne-Marie, we have the Q&A available, and maybe we have one over there.
No, I think all we've got is chat today, so it's focused there. I think we're good to go.
Perfect, thank you. And thank you, Betsy, again. So we're going to continue with our second panelist today. Is Anthony Nesbitt, ESL teacher in Craven County. So Anthony, we welcome you and thank you for sharing how you motivate your English learners to use LinguaFolio.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I just want to echo everything that Betsy said. I agree with. I've used LinguaFolio now for 3 years with my students, and the beginning of the year, I found it was very easy. We would always start our year with our goal setting activity. we would review our annual access scores and just try to pick a domain that the students want to improve in. And LinguaFolio sort of became and can become your progress monitoring tool. In our district, we use a continuous improvement model. All of our teachers, we've had training on that. It involves plan, do, study, act. So students, they see that all the time. We talk about it. They know that language. So that reflection component is built in, and it is really the ultimate voice and choice. I think the power of LinguaFolio is giving the students the opportunity to choose their own work and to upload how they want to be assessed. And periodically we meet and we go over our monitor. Where are we in the language learning progress? It is a continuum, as Betsy said, and it's a time when you can have a conference with small group of students or one-on-one. And I've really been fortunate, even at the elementary level, to have success using it because our district is one-to-one. So they all have iPads, and with the LFO to go app downloaded, they can use it and upload work samples that they've already used. They may have completed a Flipgrid speaking activity that's correlated to our language and content objective. They may have written something using Google Docs. So we will go through it and we will share and decide how that fits in. And we do that periodically, and we can go just to assess where they are. And I think the buy-in really is valuable, that students see, where they are and what they need to do, and it just gives them that ownership. So, and I think it correlates to access. We try to make a big deal out of, making those gains and exiting the program, and it gives students that knowledge of, this is what I'm doing and this is where I am, and I've got this much to do. So it's transparent, and it's the students own it. So I think that's the big takeaways and the big the great things about LinguaFolio.
Thank you, Anthony. And Anthony also shared a link to a video he created in which he talks about LinguaFolio to his students and why it's important to reflect on their language learning and why this is a formative assessment. So we're going to have that link in the chat later. And I added the emails. If you have more questions, if you want to maybe get some of the activities they have implemented that we don't have right now, just send them an email and contact them, and they will be available to share this information. And I love what you said, Anthony, that we have this correlation with what we're doing in preparation for our annual assessment, because the students are working all the time and they can see how they progress. And when they get their access scores and they have the LinguaFolio, they look and they understand, like, oh, okay, I got 3 or 4 in this language domain. What does that mean? Because LinguaFolio is based on the can-do statements, and you will see when you look at the grids, you see how it has the different WIDA proficiency levels. So then you can help your student understand, and then they own that knowledge, and they can talk to their teachers and say, oh yeah, your ESL teacher gave me your access scores, but what does that mean? And the student will be able now to say, that means that I can do this with the language, and they can show their LinguaFolio evidence, their portfolio, and say, this is what I have, this is what I can do. So I love that part. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat for Anthony. I think we have a shy crowd today. I see there is one person wants activities that Betsy use with her students. So again, we have the video. I think Marie shared the copy, the link of the video, so you can check. And there is, Betsy's video is for middle school students, but we have also a teacher implementing LinguaFolio in elementary and another one in high school. So you can get some ideas of what these teachers have done and what can be useful in your context with your own students. So I don't see any questions. Okay, so we're going to continue. And thank you very much, Anthony and Betsy, for being with us today. And we really appreciate this and all what you're doing and sharing today. So we're going to continue. We said we were going to talk about 2 of the biography components. And then, let me move the slide. We are going to talk about the intercultural experiences summary and the learning inventory. So we're going to have an activity, but we're going to complete these activities from the student perspective. So you need to put your student hat. You're not going to be the teacher in this moment when we start doing the activities. But these are 2 of the examples that you have in the biography components that can help your students know what are those things they can do with the language. Sometimes they use the language in different situations and settings, but they are not aware of that. So we need to help them be aware of that. And like, oh yeah, I went with my mom to the grocery store and I helped her asking for one of the products that we needed. And those kind of intercultural experiences are those that they can use in their LinguaFolio, and then how they reflect at the end of a unit or a class or the semester. And what is it that we have been learning and practicing? How have I been using the language? So these 2 components help with that. And we're going to share the links on our Google site. We have the Word version and the PDF version. So if you're using a learning management system, Google Classroom or Canvas, you can embed these documents there and your students can download the documents, they can work on them, and you can adapt those documents so you can use them with your students. So we're going to see the first activity is going to be about the learning inventory. So the learning inventory, as I was saying, is helping the student reflect on what they have accomplished using the language. What is it that I have learned that I have been using the language, either in any of the language domains? If we were practicing one topic in our class, how did I use the language? Did I write? Did I read about something? Did I read about something? Did I speak about it? And did we have a listening activity? If they are not only in the ESL classroom, but also in the content area class. So for this activity, let me see, we have some screenshots, and I see that in the chat you have the files now. So if you want to go and open those and look later, those are for you to look at, so you have access to that. But for this activity, think of one of your classes this semester. Maybe one of your, if you having a ESL pull-out, think of one pull-out class that you had, maybe if you were in plan B or C, or if you were participating in a Google Classroom or a Canvas with content area teachers, or you had your own online classroom. What is one class that you had? And we're going to think about this in terms of the frequency, how often you were using the language, but you are the student. Remember that for this activity, you are thinking from the perspective of one of your students. So think of your students that you saw this semester and maybe choose one. You don't have to think of your whole class, but maybe select one student and think, let's see, animations are not working for me. Okay, there you go. So you choose one of your classes, and then we're going to complete this. The next 2 slides or 3 slides are screenshots of the learning inventory. So you will see different activities that they have they could have completed in the language. So if you're the student, you're going to say, and we're going to do this in the chat so it's easier. So if you, for example, you think, okay, I was in my class and I had these opportunities to practice the language in these different ways. So let's look at the first one. And it says, for example, the first one, interpreted posters, signs, and labels that I see in my everyday life. So if I'm a student and I'm thinking about this, I say, well, maybe I had some that I saw in my classroom, and I get information, I collected information from some of those signs. So then do you mark frequently 4 or sometimes 3? So look at the activities and add in the chat which are those that you think your student will say, oh yeah, I practiced that. I had the opportunity to practice this during this semester in my class. So I'm going to be quiet for a little bit so you can go ahead and read and start adding in the chat. So let's see, we have some entries in the chat. Think of a student that was in Betsy's class, and she said that they love playing computer games. So I'm going to enter in the chat computer games, because we had that opportunity to practice that, but it wasn't very often. I think we did it a few times. So I'm going to give it a 3. I don't see any entries. So you see any? Maybe they're going to panelist or only the host. Okay, I see one. Watch videos for information. Okay, so maybe this is not something that we practice a lot. So we're going to move to the next slide and see if one of these activities, which ones can you check? We're going to check. This is just a checklist that says, okay, I did these activities. And I want to share while you read the activities and you type in the chat and you add the frequency, what your student will say is that we have a project, and stay tuned. By participating in our webinars, you are subscribed to our listserv. And at the beginning of next year, we're going to share about a project, because we're going to start adding these biography components in different languages. And I know this is very important for the ESL world, because our students, sometimes when we want to start this process with them, many of them are recently arrived students, they are newcomers, or they are in their emerging proficiency level. So when you give one of these worksheets to the student and they check in, sometimes they might not understand every single activity and they don't mark it because they really didn't understand. So this will include, if demand a little more work at the beginning with those students. And I think Betsy was talking that at the beginning she was working with them and giving them examples of those activities, but then later on they were the ones that took kind of control and they were excited about collecting the evidence. So this is a process that is going to take a little bit, but don't get discouraged, because it's a really good process. And as Anthony was saying, it will help you monitor the progress of your students and helping them do the same. So we have other entries. We work with diagrams very frequently in our class. We use graphic organizers. Very good. Now we go to the next one, the last one for this activity. And as you can see, the learning inventory, it has the different language domains. So it's not just focusing on one domain, but your students can share things they have done, writing about something, reading about something, talking about it. So they have different opportunities. And this will give you an idea. If you feel like, oh, there are many things that we're doing that are not in the inventory, then you can incorporate that in your activities, in what you are doing. So let's see with the last one. I think a lot of these, once we start preparing for access testing, we start doing a lot of writing and editing and making sure they know text structure and they're working on this and it's kind of fresh in their minds. So I know by the end of the semester, we always work on this. Okay, for the sake of time, because we have another speaker, we're going to go ahead and thank you for participating. So we have our second component. And let me see, do we have a question? Let me see before I continue. How can the learning inventory be done with early readers? So you can prepare this and add some activities with them where you have videos, when you show what they are doing, and samples that you find. We used in the past in one of the formats, and I don't know if Marie wants to talk about this. I think Betsy talked about it, the LinguaFolio Junior, that had more visual support.
Yes, Sally's right. All of these biography components have a LinguaFolio Junior version that do have visual support, like for early learners, early readers, and that kind of thing. Another thing that a lot of our teachers do with younger students using the biography components is they do these activities as a group. So you can imagine, for example, on the learning inventory like we just did, they could do that as a group instead of having the students answer individually. They could do a show of hands or something like that and work on it as a group so that they know everyone's understanding each option, and then they can indicate in different ways how often they do that or how often they do it as a class.
Thank you. So yes, you can do it. It will demand a little more of work and preparation, but it can be done. Okay, and the second one is the intercultural experiences summary. So we're going to skip the activity because we are running out of time, and I want the next guest to be able to have her time. But this one also gives the student the opportunity to reflect on what they learned, the different type of experiences they had using the language. So you can see in the screenshot that they identify the kind of experience. So there are different ones, and I think at the beginning I mentioned any experience they have using the language. If, for example, because they might say, well, I haven't traveled. So it could be a student who was born here and they feel like, well, I haven't really traveled, so I can use any of these. But the component has the option to add other experiences. So you can talk to your students, and when you have these communications with your families and you know what they do, then you can add, if you know, for example, your students come from a migrant family, then you can add something related to those kind of experiences in which the student will use the language, and that will help them be able to reflect on that and then write about it. So we have, once you select that, you say, okay, this is the type of experience that we have, then you start writing a short summary. And the beauty of this component is that when you start writing, the student might feel like they don't have all the knowledge to do it, to write a long paragraph, but then that will give you some feedback, and then you will know, okay, so maybe this is what my student was able to write this time, then what do I need to incorporate in my instruction so they can incorporate that in the writing activity when they come back to their summary and they talk about it. So this is also helping you. So we had in the activity, you were going to tell us if it was a self-reflection, open-ended feedback, or an instructional input. And you can use it in the three ways because you're helping the student reflect in their use of the language, learning that, okay, I know the social language, I know how to say something, but if I was, for example, in my science class and we learn about the water cycle, I can go home and tell my younger brother about it because it's raining, but then I'm going to use my vocabulary, the technical vocabulary, and I'm going to practice. And then when they come to their summary, they're going to talk about that experience. How was that interaction with their brother or sister talking about it? So those kind of different experiences in the language, if they feel like they are, if they're younger. Because if they're older, and you can say they can talk about a volunteering exercise they did in the school, if they helped. Sometimes high school kids, they do real outs for kindergarten. So those kind of things in which they use the language and they have that opportunity to showcase what they know and the academic language that they have learned in their classes. And then it lists the different things they can write about the language they spoke, the location, the purpose, and also a summary of their feelings and reactions during that experience using the language. And now that we talk about that, I want to welcome our next speaker. We're going to skip this for now because we know our students, sometimes they are afraid of using the language. They don't know how to do it, and we are trying to teach them how to do it, the structure of the language, and provide as many opportunities as we can. But they have other barriers that might prevent them to use the language that they might know. So we have other strategies to do it. And DPI has worked on different mapping documents, and we have some examples. And I want to invite, for DPI, the representatives working in this project, the social emotional learning competencies, are and Dr. Anne-Marie Ganter for World Languages and Ivana Mantrower Anderson for ESL. So I want to invite her to talk about this, the work with SEL, and how this combines, how this connects with LinguaFolio.
So hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So wonderful to be here with you today. And it was so exciting to hear what Betsy and Anthony had to share about their experiences using LinguaFolio. So before I say any more, I'd like you to type in the chat box how familiar you are with the SEL competencies. We've had a round of webinars. We've shared some documents. So give me a number 1 if you're really not familiar. A number 3, if you could stand up here and teach me all about the SEL competencies, and a number 2, if you're somewhere just in the middle. So if you don't mind typing in the chat box a 1, 2, or a 3. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of 1s. What else do we have? We do have shy people today. They're not even wanting to type. All right. ESL is an organization that's been working with a number of states to help them develop ways that our teachers and our students can be able to support each other through social and emotional learning. And you can see in the wheel, when we talk about the social and emotional learning, we have 5 different aspects that we're looking at. In the yellow, you have the responsible decision making, the relationship skills, and social awareness in green. And today we're going to talk about self-awareness and self-management. You can also see in the picture that once you have looked at these competencies, you move them out. You move them out into your classroom, your school, your community, and you look at how you can integrate them into what you're already doing. And one of the things that I found so exciting was that North Carolina, instead of writing separate social emotional learning competency standards, we chose to look at each of our content areas and say, you know what, we're doing this already. In some way or another, we're already addressing social and emotional learning, whether it's an ESL classroom or other content classrooms. So we did crosswalks to show how there is an alignment between the standards that we already have and social emotional learning. So you can see on the slide on the left, we have LinguaFolio, which is what we're talking about today. We're going to talk a little bit about the social emotional competencies and how LinguaFolio is a perfect way to help support that. And of course, as we do that, we have to think about WIDA, because WIDA are the English language development standards that we have aligned our SEL competencies to. There's a lot of information, but I promise you at the end of this section, we'll give you links where you can go and learn even more about the SEL. But when you think about what's happening right now with COVID, all of us, not just our students, and you'll see when we talk about SEL competencies, we also talk about the adults. Each of us need to stop and just take a deep breath and let it out and realize that we are in stressful times. And just like they say on the airplane, you've got to put your oxygen mask on before you can help others. The social emotional learning is for us as well as for our students. If you go to the next slide. In the social emotional learning documents, you will see, keep going, you will see that each of the different content areas gives you some information about the particular content area. And so for us, it's English language learners. And we know that we are working on academic achievement. That's our WIDA standards. But we also want to make sure that our students are supported linguistically and culturally while developing these core competencies in social emotional learning. So think about our English language learners. They're already working with a different language, many of them with a completely different culture. Now we're dealing with COVID, or we're dealing with a different climate while all trying to learn academic language. So think back to what Betsy and Anthony have already said and the information that Zachary just shared with you. Think about LinguaFolio. Think about what they've said about academic achievement and how using LinguaFolio helps our students with their academic achievement because they're being supported. They're being supported in many different ways, but especially through the can-do approach. If you go to the next slide. So when we're looking at the SEL competencies, we're going to focus on the orange section of our graph, the self-awareness and the self-management. Did you hear anything about self-awareness or especially self-management in what Anthony and Betsy were saying? I thought it was great to hear that Betsy was going to help guide these younger students, but they just took over. They self-managed. They grabbed onto the content. They made it their own. They became aware of their learning. And when you look at our bullets, some of the things to think about with self-awareness and self-management, especially with our English learners, are the culture, the language, and the life experience. Many of our teachers look at these students from a deficit viewpoint when we know our English language learners are bringing a wealth of knowledge, that culture, that language, that life experience, and that ties in perfectly with the intercultural experiences and the learning inventory. If we can help our English learners see how much they're bringing and help build their confidence to the fact that they are bringing something, what a wonderful way to help them grow. When you look at the second bullet, ties into that self-confidence, looking at their needs. How can we help our students become more self-confident when they're working in so many different areas that may be new to them? And then that self-efficacy. LinguaFolio empowers our students to be able to take charge of their own learning. And during that learning, it also helps them to be more confident. I remember many years ago visiting Betsy's classroom, and we did some videotaping. You may have seen some of the videos. And her students were so confident. They said, I used to be afraid of taking the tests, the EOGs and the EOCs, but now I'm excited and I make A's. How many kids do you know they're excited to take the test? The real evidence of self-confidence and self-efficacy. And then when we're thinking about our social emotional needs, we want to make sure that our students are able to identify their emotions and to use language, to be able to listen, speak, read, and write about their emotions, to be able to listen, speak, read, and write about their strengths. So as I mentioned with WIDA, we always want to be looking at listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we want to come at education of English learners from a can-do philosophy. If you haven't read the philosophy behind all of WIDA's work, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the philosophy, which is based on research about what English learners can do, about how we can take what they already have, find ways to draw it out of them, and help them grow and flourish. So many of you are familiar with the can-do descriptors, the I can statements, which, think about LinguaFolio, tie right back into LinguaFolio with the I can. And then the guiding principles of WIDA, that's what I was talking about, that has the research base, the guiding principles, which tie into the can-do philosophy, always looking at that asset approach to our English learners. And again, when you dig into LinguaFolio, if you haven't used it yet, this might all sound a little bit up in the air, but once you get a hold of it and get the opportunity to see your students get excited, it doesn't matter what age they are, elementary, middle, or high, tying into their emotions, tying into their needs to learn and to be social and confident, using LinguaFolio, using WIDA, all work together is so powerful. So we're going to give you some examples on the next two slides of some lesson activities and some teaching practices. The documents that we have published, which are, again, the crosswalk between the standards and ways to incorporate SEL. If you're an ESL teacher already, some of these things will look very familiar to you because, as I said at the beginning, we're already doing a lot of this. We just might not have been doing it purposefully under the name of SEL. And so when we think about LinguaFolio and adapting it, as Zachary mentioned several times, LinguaFolio-like activities, these are some things that you can incorporate. So some activities could include working specifically with vocabulary and always thinking about the proficiency level of your students. Happy, mad, sad, that might be great for a beginning student, but you can step it up a notch if you have a higher proficiency level. Another one in ELA or in almost any of your coursework, if there's a story with characters, you can have the students identifying with those characters, identifying feelings, identifying the way that the students are reacting. It's a wonderful way for a student to step outside of themselves and many times share their own feelings, but doing it through a character. But those are some activities to think about to help our students with self-awareness. I believe there's some teaching practices, yes. So with teaching practices, thinking of the SIOP model, thinking of WIDA, we want to make sure we build background for our students. Many times there are things that they don't have the background for, but many times there are. And so we need to find ways to connect to the students' backgrounds and their experiences. And when you're using LinguaFolio, especially if you have the students write some of their own can-do statements as they figure out where they are and where they want to go, this is a great way to connect to their experiences. Have them fill out the learning inventories. Have them use their own experiences to share with the class, and then you can better connect to their background that they already bring with them. We always want to do things like support with pictures and role plays and multimodality. So again, as an ESL teacher, you're probably very familiar with each of these things. You just might not have labeled it as SEL, and you probably haven't thought about putting the SEL together with the LinguaFolio. So the next slide takes you to our other section that we're going to look at today, the self-management. Again, I go back to, I love what Betsy said about the students taking over and telling her, no way, they're going to do it themselves. And Anthony talked about the reflective nature that his students have. That's all about self-management. So think about your classrooms, think about your students. What a dream would it be if your students were telling you, oh no, this is what we're going to do today, and I'm going to collect this information and I'm going to show you what I've learned. Or I'm kind of having a hard time, so I need to figure out what I can do to move forward and how we can tie that together with our LinguaFolio, with our WIDA. You can see things as simple as teaching breathing, like we just talked about, teaching students to take a deep breath, helping them to talk about what they're feeling in the way of stress and anxiety, and then lessons that talk about how to motivate yourself, how to keep going. We also have some teaching practices here. Scaffolding. This can be powerful for all students, even if they're not English learners. But scaffolding based on language, scaffolding based on knowledge, really looking at how do you know that a student has accomplished something. So back to LinguaFolio. When you're checking for understanding, having them put together their evidences to show you yes, not only can I check this can-do statement, but here's my evidence. It's a formative assessment, but it's great to let the students show you what they've done, or have them, as was mentioned before, have them pull from work they've already done to substantiate what they can do within LinguaFolio. Some other things there, such as modeling, repetition, and again, that checking for understanding. So on the next slide, I promised you we'd give you some more information, especially for those of you that put number 1 as not being familiar with the social emotional learning as we've been working with in North Carolina. So even before COVID hit, North Carolina was working on SEL, but once we moved into the remote learning and life changed so drastically, it became even more important. So each of these content areas that you see listed on your slide has a document that walks you through suggestions for each of those core competencies within that particular content area. Each also have webinars on the next slide. Each of these sections also have webinars that you can go back and watch and see how SEL is being integrated into the lessons. And I want to encourage you to go and look at the materials for ESL. We had a guest speaker on that particular broadcast that not only shared about what she's doing in her classroom, but also gave you lesson plans and materials that you can take and adapt for yourself to work with SEL with your students. So look at what she's done, and then look at LinguaFolio and think about, how has she used LinguaFolio-like activities in what she's doing? How has she looked at what the students can do in their listening, speaking, reading, and writing? How has she encouraged the students to be able to do more while focusing on their feelings and their need for support? So that is all I have, unless I missed something that I was going to talk about. Sally?
No, that's great. Do we have any questions from the audience about SEL and what Ivana has shared before we continue? We have a couple of minutes, so we have time for a few questions if we have some, but I don't see any questions. So I'm going to continue. Thank you, Ivana, for sharing this, and I really encourage you to go and check the Integrating SEL in ESL. That webinar was led by Ivana and one of our ESL coordinators in the field. So that will be really good. And they also share how they're doing it in their district and different resources aligning with the WIDA standards, and they can do descriptors. So you can see.
Sorry, I thought you were breathing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to finish because we are 1 minute to the end of our session today. And just a reminder, we have all our materials on our Google site. You have the ESL materials. You can look at the teacher videos. You have the different trainings. We have the Canvas training that you can complete. And just go ahead and check. There are new opportunities coming up. We are going to get together in January the 12th to talk about setting goals and choosing can-dos. So one recommendation, I didn't see a lot of questions. Maybe we all are tired or the information is very clear. I hope so. That's why. Maybe it's familiar with what we were talking in the previous webinars. But for January the 12th, during our LinguaFolio Cafe, that's a space for you. So you can bring all your questions. So even if you don't implement LinguaFolio with your students, I will say do it yourself. Complete your own LinguaFolio. Go on the website, look at everything, and go. And I'm going to go back to the link so you can see it. bit.ly/NCLF home. So just go there, look, and do it for yourself, because I think that's the easiest way to understand how LinguaFolio works. When you can use it, when you reflect, and you're familiar with the materials, and then you can help your students. And that could be a project after next year or for next semester, how you're going to use it. So I'm going to say there's a task for our LinguaFolio Cafe that is in January the 12th. We're going to talk about setting goals and choosing can-dos. We're going to have other experts from the field, like today, Anthony and Betsy. And thank you for sharing that information. And then they're going to share. And we hope that you can have some other questions about LinguaFolio, how to implement it, or if you have a plan, maybe you are implementing in that stage. Please ask all your questions because we really have this tool for you. It's available, it's free. We have the different formats. We can do it on paper or you can use the online version. So it's there and we want you to use it because it's really good. It's a great tool for your students. So I don't see any questions. If you have any questions, this is our last slide. Information about our webinar series. We always post our video recordings and the presentations in different formats that you can download and use. If you're a school leader or you're a lead teacher and you want to share with other educators in your school, then you can use this information adapted as you need it. So please go and check our information. We're going to have the ESL slide deck and presentation tomorrow by the end of the day, so you can access, download it, and use it. So thank you very much. Let's see if we have any questions. And thank you, Ivana, our third guest today, for sharing. And I don't see any questions, Anne Maria. I don't know if you have anything in the Q&A.
I think we're good. We've had a few questions asked about the LinguaFolio Cafes coming up. So I put a direct link into the LinguaFolio Cafe page on the LinguaFolio Google site. But you can always go to the Google site that we put in there with the bit.ly link and go under professional development to find the page for our webinars where we'll post archives as well as the links to the future broadcasts. Same thing with the LinguaFolio Cafes. You can go on the page that we put in there, but under professional development, and you can connect to those sign-up sheets.
Okay, if we still have some participants online, we had some information about upcoming conferences. We have the Virtual Spring Conference Flank. This is one of the World Languages main conferences, but we have invited ESL teachers in the past because it's about language acquisition and language learning. So you will benefit from this. And then our main conference, that is TESOL. So we have the links and you can check the different links and review, and maybe this is something you want to participate in. We are working on our sponsorships for next semester, so stay tuned in our listservs. We might be able to offer our sponsorships next year, and if you want to attend these conferences, you will have that opportunity to apply for one of the sponsorships. So thank you very much. I think we can stop the recording if we don't have any questions. I'm going to leave this last information that we have shared before. And somebody asked about the sponsorships, how you can apply. So we have on our Google site the information, and we always share. So you are going to be subscribed to our listserv. Once you are in the listserv, you get all our information. So once it's ready, you're going to see a message in your email from the LinguaFolio listserv or the Teachers of English Learners listserv talking about the sponsorships. We always have a webinar and we provide information on how the sponsorship works, what is the project that you complete, and what is the reimbursement, and all the information about it. So stay tuned. You will receive that information. If you want to see about the previous events that we have sponsored on our Google site, in the ELD Google site, and I'm going to write the bit.ly in the chat so you have it, then you can go and explore the previous ones. For next semester, you just stay tuned, check your email. Once you receive the listserv from LinguaFolio or Teachers of English Learners, you will have that information. Okay, the bit.ly is in the chat. and we can stop the recording.